Hey guys, today I just want to talk a little bit about why I left Australia 4 years ago and why I won't be going back to live there, probably never again. So this conversation always comes up when I take an Uber or a taxi or speak to a local here in Colombia where I live. They're always like, hey, but you're so far away from home, don't you miss it? Why do you live here? Why did you choose to live in Medellin instead of Australia? Australia is such a good country. They've seen one side of it on the news and what they read and things about Australia and maybe the US being an incredible place to live, but actually, a lot of us want to move to other countries. First thing I always tell them when they ask me, why do you live here? I say, I can do more. I can live better. I can work less. I can enjoy my time with my friends more. And I can do the things I love. That's not to say anything bad about Oz, where I was from. I'm from Melbourne. I had a nice life there, but I had to work for it. I had to work very hard and I had to work a full-time job to be able to do all the things that I want. Now, if I wanted to, I could work only a few hours a week and still live a comfortable life. If you've seen any of my other videos talking about my life here, my expenses are only about $1,000 US a month. How far is that going to take you in your country? Probably just paying that in rent, right? I always give them this example. Okay, you go to a restaurant here, right? Let's not say 5-star Hilton restaurant or Michelin star or whatever. And not street food either. Let's talk about a sit-down restaurant where you might go to meet a friend and have lunch or dinner. So here, in Medellin, how much does that cost you? And they're normally like, maximum, 15,000, 20,000 pesos, which is about $4 to $5. And I tell them, okay, so here you eat out for $4 to $5. You know how much of the same thing in a medium restaurant in Australia or the US would cost you? Well, in Melbourne, where I'm from, you go to a restaurant and you have just, chicken and vegetables or something, nothing fancy. That's gonna end up costing you like $20, $25. So immediately you can see how much further your dollar goes here. Another thing, activities. How many times have you thought, hey, I want to do this or I want to do that, but it's just too expensive, and that's just another reason for you to put it off. So for me, those things were tennis lessons and singing lessons. They've always been not at the top of my list, but just things that I've always wanted to work on. Think about that for a sec. Wherever you are watching this now, tell me how much those things would cost where you're from. Here in Medellin, every week I get tennis lessons for $5, singing lessons an hour one-on-one for $10. Immediately, this is why a lot of people come here and improve themselves, because they just have access to so many more things. The other huge thing I'll say is that people are so much more warm here. I mean, it really depends which country you go to, but when I was in Mexico, they were super friendly, and especially in Colombia and Brazil as well. I noticed when I was in Brazil traveling, I didn't speak Portuguese, so I didn't get very far, but I immediately noticed that wherever I was, in the gym, on the street, people would come talk to me and just be curious of, hey, where are you from? What are you doing? And I'd reply in my minimal Portuguese. But people are curious, people approach you, people want that human connection. In Oz, a lot of the time, it's like, just look forward, you're going to work, concentrate on what you got to do that day. If anyone else is looking at you or smiling at you, f them, just keep going. It's all about you. Where here, it's more of a community feel, and it's a lot easier to meet people. I talk about this in my other video, A Year in Medellin, where I review my first year living in Medellin. And there I said that a lot of the times I would meet people for the first time, they'd be super friendly, and then they'd invite me to other things immediately. There's no barrier. I don't know how it is in your countries, but in Oz, we're super closed. We need to meet someone, 2, 3, 4, 5 times before we'll invite them somewhere, usually. I know there's outliers, but usually it takes time to build a connection, build a friendship, and let someone into your friends group. Whereas here, it's just like, hey, you're a cool guy, you're a cool girl, let's hang out, that's it. Australia is in the middle of nowhere. Here, where I live, in Colombia, within 5-6 hours I can be in Brazil. 2 hours I can be in Peru. Another 5 hours I can be in the US. Within 3 hours or whatever I can be in Mexico. There's just so much access to travel and experiencing other cultures and countries. In Australia, I can go to Bali, which is basically all Australians anyway. I can go to New Zealand, which is basically the same thing as Australia. There's not that much access to being in a completely different place. Like some of you are watching this from New York City or California. You can go from California and land in Mexico City. That's like, 2 hours? And it's a completely different culture, different language, different food, different looking people. Everything's different. So you just have that much more access to the outside world. In Australia, we're so far away, it's like being locked in an island. And I think we're also very closed-minded. We don't know that much about the outside world, about other cultures, because we're just closed and we just have that island mentality of it's just us. So many of my friends, I've been living here for like almost 2 years, and they still ask me stupid questions like, hey, how's the cocaine, how's Pablo, blah, 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 just dumb shit, because that's all they know about Colombia, because we don't get taught that stuff because we're living in our little island isolated world. Travel within Australia as well is super expensive. I live in Melbourne. If you guys don't know where that is, that's on the east coast. We have a city on the west coast in the state of Western Australia called Perth. I've never been there. The flight there and back is about $600. For that price, I can just go to Bali and back. And in Bali, things are like a quarter of the price than in Perth. So I just went there instead. In Colombia, where I live, I've already talked about the access to other countries which are so close, but also within the country, it's so diverse. I can take a $30 flight, I can be at the beach. I can take a half-an-hour taxi, I can be up in the mountains in the forest. I can take another 2-hour flight, I can be in the complete desert. It's just so diverse and there's so many options. It just makes for a much more diverse and dynamic life. In Oz, we don't have states which are that varied and people which are that varied. You go to Melbourne, you go to Sydney, you go to Adelaide, you go to Perth. Usually the people are going to speak more or less the same, act more or less the same. There's not that much difference. In Colombia, they have something very different. They have something where in every state, the people talk different, they have different slang, they even look different. It just makes life that much more exciting. Racism. The least amount of racism that I've ever experienced in my life is since I left Australia. Since I've been living in Colombia, everyone's been very accepting. I've never heard anyone say anything derogatory or offensive to me. But in Australia, pretty much all the time, whether it was casual. You guys from the States might not understand this term, casual racism. It's a very big thing in Australia. For example, could be one of my friends or something sees me coming, he could say something like, hey Blackie, how you doing? Try that in the US, see what happens to you. It's not going to be a fun experience, but in Oz, that happens all the time. It's ingrained in our culture that, hey, if you don't mean it in a bad way, it's just funny, it's a joke. That type of stuff, you know, as offensive as it may be to a lot of people, it didn't really get to me. What got to me was the discrimination in the workplace. Australia likes to pretend like we're a very accepting country of all cultures and we let all people in. Yes, we let them in, but do we treat them same as the white people? I don't think so. I had a friend who was a recruiter, okay? And she told me that her bosses specifically told her if anyone has a very long Indian or Asian name, they're obviously not white Australians, don't even give me their resume because our clients don't want to hire them. My cousin, for a long time, shortened his last name. He had a very long name because he wanted to do a test. He tested his full name versus his shortened name, and the number of callbacks he got for resumes were like times 10 immediately because they didn't know that he wasn't a white Australian. So yeah, these kind of things do exist, sadly, still. I really haven't felt anything like that since I left. And that's really been nice, you know, to be treated fairly and not looked down upon, even though, you know, everybody should be treated the same. But yeah, I just want to wrap up to say those are my personal experiences and those are the reasons why I left, and I don't think I'll be going back anytime soon because my life is so much better since I moved away. I'm living it at 110% now, whereas back home it was only like, you know, 50, 60%. It was comfortable, but it wasn't exciting, it wasn't exhilarating, and every day I wasn't waking up being like, yeah, I'm ready to live today. Whereas now, I am. So if you're at a plateau or you're bored with your life, maybe you need to get out of where you are, try something different, dedicate 6 months or a year to it, see how it goes. If you want more info on how exactly to do that, watch this video right here and I explain everything, complete guide.